Hello and welcome to another video about the game In Force to Heaven by VUCA Simulations. Today I'd like to show you some insight about smaller scenarios. So let's take an example of September 9th, the middle of the campaign. So we have three scenarios regarding this part of the game. We have a great campaign counteroffensive scenario which starts at 7th September. It's kind of a checkpoint for the big campaign. And we have scenario number 9, which is centered around Polish counteroffensive of the time. Scenario 10, which is centered around German attack and Narew River breakthrough. And scenario 11, which actually starts a day earlier, but it's almost the same setup on the map as the September 9th, which is about German push against Bug River and Lvov city. So first let's open the counteroffensive scenario. So we have the whole map, we have units of all armies, and if you pay attention to the unit setup, I have created something like a historical campaign. Like this is a exact historical war path of all armies. And if we jump to, and actually it goes from September 1st up to historical date of 6th October. So if we look at the September 9th, we can see that this is exactly the same setup. So if you'd like to see the historical path, how this all came to be at this point, you can always take a look and simply start the campaign with knowing the context, what has happened before and what is actually happening around. But this is a campaign scenario, and in this case we have all of the rules regarding sequence of play, all of the steps are used. Now, what are scenarios about? Are trying to be smaller parts of the campaign. They are supposed to make you feel like this is still a great campaign going on in the country and you are just playing only a part of it. And there are few tools to make this feel. So first let's close this scenario and open the scenario 9, which is the center part of this period of the campaign. So instead of the whole map, we have only this part. It is exactly the same setup as on the campaign for September 9th, but we only play with those units that matter around the counteroffensive area, the Polish counteroffensive area. And to make you feel that this is part of a campaign, it is still not done. I will show you my raw text file. It is not yet changed into the final layout. And just to show you how will it look like, those are first 5 scenarios laid out in the final graphics, almost final graphics. For example, we have scenario 5, we have situational map, we have some scenario traits, and important thing about this, about every smaller scenario, is that we have some special rules, specific rules, special victory conditions, some special tables, and most of all a special sequence of play. So the sequence of play is there to not make you go through the main sequence of play and think about what is needed or what is not needed. So for example, in the main sequence of play, if we play campaign, we have phases like radio broadcast, Danzig Bay, Warszawa reconstruction, and some additional informations about many other things that are going on. And if we open the scenario SOP, all of those all of those phases that are not needed. For example, in this scenario, we don't need any kind of Warszawa, Moral, Danzig Bay, or any political phases. So all of this is postponed, and as this sequence of play is almost exactly and is laid out exactly as the main sequence of play, you will feel familiar with it, but you will immediately see what are you not using. So for example, let's see those two phases. Unit logistics. So in the main SOP, in unit logistics, we have late mobilization and Polish command chaos, and of course reinforcements, replacements, and September 14th plus rule reminder. For the scenario SOP, we have only reinforcements and replacements, which are calculated so a player does not have to think and calculate any of those. We don't use late mobilization because it doesn't really apply or affect this front. It happens in the game at this point in the campaign, but it doesn't really affect this scenario. And we don't use command house because those rules regard general staff and they are not used in this smaller scenario. For example, in case of Luftwaffe, we have steps to move Luftwaffe from maintenance. There's a little mistake, it should be maintenance box to LF holding box, and flown should be a replacement. Anyway, some movements about the units, reorganizing some units, and basically we are using all of the units, Luftwaffe units that are in the game. In case of smaller scenarios, we have this automated, which is laid out in a sentence check scenario special rules. And as each scenario is very different from each other, all scenarios will need to have some special rules to show you the special situation that is regarding this scenario, but all of the scenarios will have similar layout, like what are the changes for initiative, what are the changes for preservation, what are the changes for activations, and for example, what are the changes for Luftwaffe. So in this case, the German player will not do any kind of reorganization or think about how many units are there available. He will simply make a dice roll and see how many units does he get. For example, morale is not used, and we have some extra special rules regarding units, like for example units in Modlin, where Modlin is committed to some other part of the front, and Novogródzka Cavalry Brigade, which is part of a army that is not really there, have some special rules that cannot be activated or considered out of command for the remainder of this scenario. Also, as an example, 10th Army support is lowered to 2 divisional artillery assets. It of course models situation where there is something going on in another part of the front. So this scenario, particularly this scenario, is a Polish counter-offensive, as mentioned before. This regards some important tasks like, and by the way, this scenario doesn't start, this is the only scenario that doesn't start at 5 a.m. It starts with the historical hour of the attack. And for example, we have special Polish coordination cheat and Polish initiative. So those two mechanics merge and are used in case of Polish counteroffensive. So basically the Polish player in each turn will have an option, instead of a German player, we have an option to play coordination cheat at 5 a.m., starting the day with the Polish attack. Why am I mentioning this now? Because let's close this scenario. Let's open this scenario Narew River, which happens east of area of counteroffensive. So we have this scenario, but if we see, and of course this is part of the campaign, setups are exactly the same. So we had exactly this part in the scenario 9, we have exactly this part in scenario 10. So the way to make it feel like this is part of the same campaign is, for example, in special rule that, remember, I just showed you that scenario 9 starts at 1 p.m. with the Polish counteroffensive, the Polish attack with the coordination marker. So in this part, from the perspective of this part of the front, at 1 a.m. there will be no activation cheat automatic, because this is where the counteroffensive starts. And there's something happening on the other part of the front which does not regard this part of the front. And if we check special rules for the scenario 10, which is 40 to 1 Narew River line, we have in initiative section of special rules information that the no act cheat is played for every 500 activation of every turn. Why? The Polish has virtual initiative. However, since the main Polish effort is concentrated in the Bzura sector, from September 10th onward, the first activation of the turn is always no act. It is assumed that the Polish coordination cheat is used for the Bzura battle. We have, of course, some calculations regarding Luftwaffe, which also scale towards focus on the different part of the front. Also, we have a special SOP, which, for example, does not include any rules regarding counteroffensive because they are not used for this scenario. And to use this occasion for showing precisely what player has to do and what option does he have, for example, in this part of the map, in scenario 10, we won't have any minor cities, like for example, this one, Radom. This part won't include any kind of those cities. We have only one major city that can realistically be attacked and will have to be cleared. Thus, the sequence of play for scenario 10 will specifically tell you that only Białystok is able to be cleared.